Tonight on Perspectives. The US warns Russia to get ready for military strikes in Syria after Russia threatens to down American jets striking at its ally, the Assad government.
A congresswoman.
You're collecting that data, what people purchase online. Yes,
I actually, if they share it with us.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg faces a much tougher crowd as he testifies before Congress for a second consecutive day. And from generation to generation, the world remembers. Holocaust Remembrance Day ceremonies begin in Israel. Thank you for joining us here on Perspectives. I'm Tracy Alexander. Missiles will be coming to Syria. That's the warning coming from US President Donald Trump in the wake of that suspected poison gas attack. The promised 24 to 48-hour deadline decision has expired. Instead, Trump sending threatening messages towards Russia, lambasting it for standing by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. It comes after the Kremlin's foreign ministry saying it would protect Syria from an assault. On Twitter, Trump saying Russia vows to shoot down any and all missiles fired at Syria. Get ready, Russia, because they will be coming nice and new and smart. You shouldn't rather be partners with a gas-killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it. Russia's foreign ministry launched its reply via Facebook, saying smart missiles should fly towards terrorists, not towards the lawful government, referring to Syrian rebels and Assad, of course, respectively there. Now, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that pro-government forces were evacuating major airports and military air bases in Syria, as satellite images over Syria show all 11 Russian battleships leaving the country. We now go to Middle East and geopolitical analyst Matthew Brodsky. Matthew, great to have you with us as always. Is the United States, if it does move forward with a strike, risking killing or wounding Russians in it? And what if it actually does?
Well, okay, I think the United States has basically sent a warning to Russia that it is going to be okay in its Russian bases, that being Khmeimim, the airfield that it has, and its port in Tartous. I think that that's where they're going to try to keep their equipment. But I think much like Israel's rules of engagement with Syria, they're basically saying that we're going to hit anything that we consider to be a Syrian base. And so if they happen to have Revolutionary Guards from Iran there, Quds Force there, if they happen to have Russians there, well, then that's their problem. And that's why if you follow on Twitter, you can see accounts, whether they're verified or not, of people moving in different directions, reports of Assad leaving or not. You can find almost anything, obviously, out there. But I think the main point is that the United States is not going to attack Russia unless Russia decides to stay in the target zone.
Now, how much confusion does this recent turn of events add to a US policy in the region?
Well, I think it's very clarifying, though one can quibble about the tactics right now of broadcasting what you might or might not do. But frankly, Russia was going to continue pushing until it met steel as opposed to mush. And all it's received is mush. So it's about time that someone stands up and says that we're not going to allow this. For too long, basically, you've had Russia as the top dog in Syria, and there's no one to balance that role. Israel's had to play its own cards. Jordan has had to do the same, and all the other players involved, but there's no one to balance Russia's role. If the United States decides to play an assertive role, it finally can create balance in that equation. That is good.
Now, to that point, I just want to bring up another tweet that was put out by President Trump earlier today. He said our relationship with Russia is worse now than it has ever been, and that includes the Cold War. We've heard him say that many times. But we know, as you pointed to, that Israel also has a particular interest in keeping Russia on side. And it's angered Russia recently with its recent strike on an Iranian military base in Syria, as well as condemning this alleged chemical attack. So what does an angry Russia mean for both the US and Israel?
That depends if Russia wants to take out its aggression on the United States against Israel, but I don't think that that is the most likely type of scenario. I mean, the fact is, I think Israel, when it struck the T4 base, or when reports indicate that that happened, that was them dealing with their own red line. It wasn't tied into the chemical weapons issue that the United States is currently dealing with. So really, Russia could extend its air umbrella if it wanted to. Israel tends to not strike north of Homs all that often. But so they could extend their S-400 anti-aircraft systems further south, which would inhibit Israel a bit more, perhaps. But Russia doesn't want to come to blows with Israel. I don't think they want to come to blows with the United States. It's just no one has actually stood up to challenge them yet. And finally, the Trump administration appears to be doing that.
Certainly, it doesn't want to come to blows with Israel. But of course, Israel needs to keep its interests intact in Syria, keeping Russia on side to keep Iran in check. It would prefer to see Russia at the helm rather than Iran. To that point, though, a United States strike could, of course, no doubt weaken Assad, but could it weaken Iran?
Well, this is what depends on what the goal of the, what the mission is for the United States. Is it just to deter? The one last year was to degrade his ability to do it and also to deter. So obviously an actual military strike is going to have to be more deterring. Israel understands deterrence is an ongoing process. The Trump administration hoped, it would appear, that a one-off event last April was going to do it, and it hasn't. So if the goal is just deterrence, we'll see what kind of military strike that is. But, I don't foresee the president trying to own the Syrian mess. The mess was there before it has even arrived. I think it's there to establish its own red lines finally, and not allow Russia and Iran to dictate that. This is not good for Iran any way you look at it.
All right, Matthew Brodsky, appreciate that insight there. Now, while the United States may take unilateral action, there are more local key players that are also heavily invested in Syria. So which countries have an interest and what are their motives? Emily Rose has the story.
The U.S. is threatening to strike after Russia blocked attempts for an independent investigation into allegations of chemical attacks in Douma, Syria.
History will record that on this day, Russia chose protecting a monster over the lives of the Syrian people.
As Russia, Iran, and Turkey are vying for control, these key players each have different interests in Syria. Russia is rising to become a top dog in the Middle East and has a strategic naval port just outside of Homs, which cements Kremlin presence in the Mediterranean. Turkey has conducted military operations in Syria's north, fighting the Kurds on their border. Iran has military bases, a growing concern for Israel. And Israel has said it won't allow it.
We will not allow Iranian military presence in Syria, no matter what the cost.
Saudi Arabia, concerned about Iran's growing reach and a new geopolitical reality, says it will also act.
Your question was about the participation of Saudi Arabia in actions against the Syrian regime. If our alliance of our partners requires it, we will be present.
And the next 72 hours could change all the facts on the ground. Emily Rose, I-24 News.
Now, as we mentioned, Israel also has a stake in Syria. Of course, it has its focus set on Iran. So after the break, we look at Russia's Vladimir Putin, who's called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, urging him not to strike Syria. We go in depth about the security coordination between the two countries as the conflicting interests around Iran create tense divisions. A lot more to come here on Perspectives. Don't go anywhere.